If you were to look into your crystal ball and tell me the Green Bay Packers won the NFC in about 8 months, I would tell you continuity is what got them there.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. This episode brought to you by the Amazon Fire Stick TV 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox, no console needed. Head to amazon.com/FireTV to learn more. The Green Bay Packers can win the NFC because they face, as we head into 2025, the fewest questions in the NFC. You go back and you look at what they were in 2024. All the underlying numbers say this was a top 10 offense, a top 10 defense, and a top 10 team overall. And in fact, if you look at DVOA, and I like to, third in total DVOA, a top 5 offense, a top 10 defense. How do you like those numbers? I pointed out on social media yesterday, it is very strange to me that the Rams seem to be power ranked ahead of the Packers right now, when the Rams were 26th in defensive DVOA, the Packers were top 10. The Rams were 17th in offensive DVOA, the Packers were third. The Packers were a meaningfully better team last year than the LA Rams. What we remember is how they played against the Eagles, forgetting who the Packers were missing in that game, and ultimately that matchups, when you don't have Elton Jenkins and you're going against Jalen Carter and Milton Williams, and you don't have Christian Watson and you lose Jaden Reed and you lose Romeo Doubs in the game, that those things matter a lot. Okay? But it's not just that. And we've talked about this a number of times over the course of the offseason, but now we get to sit here, having seen the moves the Eagles and the Rams and the Niners and the Vikings and the Lions have made. And the Eagles, they have more questions than the Packers. They've got to replace an offensive coordinator who steadied a ship that had really gone off course in 2023. Kellen Moore, now the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. They move on from a number of key defensive players. Milton Williams in free agency, Darius Slay. They've got to replace those players. Those are impact high-level players. The Packers don't have any of those because it looks like a Jaire Alexander reconciliation is in the offing. More on that to come. The Detroit Lions, they lose Ben Johnson. He's now in Chicago. It would be foolish to assume the Lions are just going to maintain that level of efficiency given how important that offensive coaching was to the success of their offense. Plus, they stayed incredibly healthy, especially at some of their key positions. And Aaron Glenn, who I was frankly in the camp of that guy is overrated until last year when he took the island of misfit defenders and turned them into an impact defense in big games last year. He's now in New York. Can their new coaches be anywhere near as good as their old coaches? That is an enormous question mark, in addition to the fact that despite being a 15-win team, they were not actually a 15-win team by the underlying metrics. Those are major question marks. It's easy to forget now that the original coaching staff, not Ben Johnson, the original OC, Anthony Lynn, Darrell Bevell, like that's what this looked like. There's no guarantee Dan Campbell, because he was lucky enough to be able to say, hey, we'll just keep Ben Johnson, and that turned out really good. There's no guarantee that the next guy is going to be anywhere near as good as Ben Johnson was. We know the Minnesota Vikings problem. What is their quarterback going to do? They have spent an entire offseason batting their little eyelids at every veteran quarterback on the market. But then saying, oh, no, we believe in JJ McCarthy, but we would consider Aaron Rodgers. We would consider Kirk Cousins, but we believe in JJ McCarthy. We swear we believe in JJ McCarthy. But is there anyone else that we could bring in veteran-wise? Joe Flacco, could you come in? Like, could we get somebody? Daniel Jones, can we do this? But they believe in JJ McCarthy. They promise. They swear. Swearsies, realsies. They believe in JJ McCarthy. Sure. That is an enormous question mark. The most important position in the sport. Maybe the most important position. No, let me be declarative about it. The most important position in sports. And we have no idea if that guy can play. No idea. Look, Bears fans, Lions fans, Vikings fans, I know you listen to the show and you will come to my mentions because you also follow me on social media. And you will say, but Jordan Love, he's not actually that good. Let's assume that's true. It's not, but let's assume that's true. He has produced over his first 2 seasons as a starter like a top 10 quarterback by efficiency. That is proven. The data is there. The hay is in the barn. We have no idea what JJ McCarthy is. That is an enormous question. Can he produce at something close to the level of Jordan Love's production? We have no idea. We know what Love's production is. We know what that level is. We know that he can lead a top 5 offense, a top 10 offense. We know that. It's not a question. Okay. What about out west? The Rams? That defense was bad, guys. It was bad. Bad. 26th by DVOA. And yes, they had a virtuosic performance against the Minnesota Vikings when Sam Darnold was a deer in headlights and they just absolutely kicked the ass of that Vikings offensive line. The Packers could not do that, particularly in that second game in Minnesota when Sam Darnold had an out-of-body experience against Jeff Hafley's defense. But Jeff Hafley's defense was a top 10 unit last year. It seems like Ja's coming back. They're adding Nate Hobbs. They're adding rotational pass rush. You're hoping for an improvement from Lucas Van Ness, but even if you don't get it, even if all you get is last year's defense plus Nate Hobbs, that's assuming Edrin Cooper doesn't take a step forward. That's assuming Quay Walker doesn't stay healthier. That's assuming Devontae Wyatt doesn't stay healthier. That's assuming Kenny Clark doesn't stay healthier. That's assuming their young players don't take a step forward. Javon Bullard, Evan Williams, Carrington Valentine, Brenton Cox. It's already a top 10 defense, a defense that played championship caliber defense in a playoff game. They don't have the question mark of can they play well enough on defense to win a football game in the playoffs. We saw it happen. So there's just no question. Like the Eagles scored 28 points against the Rams in the postseason. And that was in a snowstorm, in a blizzard. Saquon Barkley had 205 yards rushing. He averaged 8 yards a carry against that defense. And it's easy to forget now that was a 10-win team last year. Okay, they added Devontae Adams. They also, speaking of making googly eyes at every veteran quarterback on the market, the Rams, Sean McVay did a national media hit where he's talking about, well, maybe it makes sense to move on from Matthew Stafford, their 37-year-old oft-injured quarterback who has not played 17 games in a season since 2021. That's true. Look it up. Has not played 17 games in a season since 2021. He's 37. You need the offense to be elite. You added Devontae Adams, you can do that. But if they're having to play whoever the 2025 version of John Wolford is, that's going to be problematic. So, and there was reports that they wanted to take a quarterback early in this draft. I know Jimmy Garoppolo is actually the backup quarterback on this team, but Jimmy Garoppolo has not been an NFL player, really, since, we don't need to talk about it, right? Like, we don't need to bring up what happened the last time we really saw Jimmy Garoppolo in a big game. We don't have to bring it up, right? All right, let's not. But my point is, the Packers don't have these questions. They have answers. The question that they face is, can this team with this makeup win in the playoffs? They can't answer that in the regular season. They can't answer it until the playoffs. But if you were going to say, well, what questions did you have for them going into the offseason? At or near the top of that list is, did they get a premier playmaker to be that difference maker in the postseason? Well, Matthew Golden, Savion Williams, they added Aaron Banks to this offensive line for depth. They added Anthony Belton and John Williams to this offensive line for depth. They added to the pass rush on day 3. Barron Sorrell was a top 100 player for me. Colin Oliver, Nate Hobbs in coverage. They've solidified this defense. They don't have those question marks. And they've added players who can raise the ceiling. They have a higher floor. I think you can make the case right now today, they have a higher floor than any team in the NFC. The question is about the ceiling. Have they raised their ceiling enough? Well, keeping Jaire Alexander would be a big piece of that. We'll talk about the latest with John Money next on Locked On Packers. Did you know Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. How do you game when you're not in front of your main setup, hotel stays, family visits, or even just the bedroom? Fire TV Stick 4K makes it possible to keep playing from almost anywhere. Plus, everything's in one place for you. Netflix, YouTube, 1.5 million shows and movies. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On. All one word, Fire TV Locked On, to get started. XPass Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, 2nd Gen Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen Fire TV Cube, 3rd Gen. Albert Breer now reporting that the most likely outcome, at least as he sees it, is that Jaire Alexander is back in Green Bay on a new deal with a pay cut plus incentives. And the reason is because Jaire Alexander does not want to get traded. He would like, if the Packers are going to move on from him, again, this is not I want to be traded or I want to be cut. This is, if you're going to move on from me, and I think some of this has been a little misinterpreted, but the way that I read what was being reported is, if you're going to move on, I want to be cut so I can decide where I'm going to go. As we talked about yesterday, what the last month and a half has shown is, if Jaire Alexander is cut, the money waiting for him on the other side is probably just not better than what he's currently getting. Now, our pal Wendell Fajera rightly pointed out that when the Packers negotiated with Aaron Jones on a pay cut, Aaron Jones believed the market would bear out for him more than the Packers were willing to offer. But that was after he had already taken one pay cut, and we're talking about a player who is a running back. I know the age curve at corner is different, but the value there is different. It just is. Now, we don't know what the Packers are offering in terms of money, and we don't know what would be out there in terms of money. But considering the Packers don't have to cut Jaire Alexander, and any team acquiring him understands, look, we have to give up something. The market is clearly such that Green Bay is going, we would rather just keep him and figure this out than take your pittance of a deal. But the market, such that it is, suggests to Jaire Alexander's agent, I assume, hey, look, the money is not really going to be there. So the best thing you can do, and this was the case that I made for Davante Adams pushing for a trade versus being released outright. The difference is the Jets had no leverage because they had to get off that money before free agency. But the best thing for Jaire Alexander is to negotiate against the salary he currently makes and say, okay, you want to take $5 million off the current salary? Let's do that, and let's make it per game bonuses. I think that makes a ton of sense for the Packers, because then it's not performance. It's not like, what you're doing is you're showing good faith to Jaire Alexander. You're an all-pro player. We believe when you're out there, you will play at elite level. So we're not going to put performance incentives in. We're not going to put interceptions in. We don't want you chasing interceptions. We're not going to put team incentives in. We're not going to put interception numbers in. No. All we're going to do is make these incentives about, are you playing on Sundays or Thursdays or Mondays or the occasional Saturday? If you think about it, that's a show of good faith. That's a show of support by saying, look, we know when you're out there, you're a high-level football player. What we need is for you to be out there. And maybe if there's a financial incentive to be out there, remember the Rob Bukowski report that, hey, look, there were times when the Packers felt like maybe he could have played and didn't. So you tie his performance, not his performance, just being able to perform. This is not a Blue Chew ad, I promise. To just being out there. Were you active on game day? Could you play? And if so, here's the money. And you can make all the money back. And I would be willing, if I were Russ Ball, and I'm not, and you're probably very glad that I'm not. But if I were in that position, I would be willing to say, look, Jaire, take a pay cut. Okay? Take the base salary down. And let's take it like significantly down. But let's make it so you get a huge game day bonus where if you are active and you play, you get big time money. And this is not totally unusual. I would be willing to say, we will set up this contract so you could make, if you play, let's say 17 games, you play every game, you can make more money than you're currently slated to make. Because look, if Jaire Alexander plays 17 games, he's worth more than the contract he's currently on. He's that good a player. But if he only plays 8 games, he's not worth that contract, which is the gamble. That's the risk that any team acquiring the contract takes. It's why that contract is not out there right now. That's why teams are not willing to give up the capital to get that contract, because the contract is the question mark. We know the play. When Jaire's out, when Jaire's out there, it's good. He's a good player. Is he what he was in 2021? No. But if he was able to stay healthy for 17 games, he'd be worth the money. No question. No question. So there is a middle ground to find here. And it makes sense for Jaire Alexander to say, look, if you're going to move on, let me pick where I want to go. Even if it's not about the money for him. And it might not be. He may just want to go play for so-and-so defense. I don't know. He may just want to go play with Lamar Jackson, his college teammate, one of his good buddies. Go chase a title in the AFC. There was some suggestion that might be one of the trade destinations. There's a middle ground here that works for everybody. And I think there's a reason you're seeing Albert Breer report this, like, hey, I think the most likely outcome here is this, because this is the outcome that really made the most sense all along. It just seemed like for a long time, the Packers were resolute in saying, this is untenable. But this is why, when you think about divorce proceedings, they want you to cool off. They want you to take some space. They want you to take some time. That's like baked into the proceedings. Hey, let's everybody calm down here. And now there's more distance since the weirdness of the season, since how the season ended. Emotions were high. And now it's like, well, wait, you look around the NFC, go back to our A block, you look around the NFC and you go, hey, with Jaire Alexander, like, why aren't we the best team in the league? Or at least the NFC. We can be. Why don't you just, Ja, come on, come home. Your clothes are all still here. We can work this out. It makes sense for the Packers for that to happen. Like that, that happens. I mean, look at San Francisco. Brandon Ayuk was gone. He had packed his bags. He gets an extension. Deebo Samuel asked to be traded. He was gone. Got an extension. Now, eventually he got traded. It is not unheard of at all for these things to be mended. And usually it's about making the money make sense. And if I'm the Packers, again, I am willing to say, look, we'll go above what you're making now. Let's take that base salary down. Let's insulate us and you bet on yourself. And what I have suggested, and I suggested this yesterday on the radio, make it so it's a 1-year free agent deal. So we'll take that second year off, play with your incentives this year, and then if you want to go hit free agency in a year, go nuts. I think that's a win-win for everybody. Now, the Packers have made officially another one of these decisions. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. That's Quay Walker, who had his 5th-year option declined. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Packers. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make the most informed NFL fan this season. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Quay Walker did not have his 5th-year option picked up, but Brian Gutekunst has made clear, as we discussed a little bit yesterday, that they want him down the line, long-ish term, medium term. And my proposal was a 3-year, $30 million extension. That's really a 2026 and 2027 extension. You give him $15 million guaranteed up front, which is basically what that 5th-year option is, but then they can prorate it. And it basically gives them a chance to have him in 2026 for more money up front now, but for less money in 2026. So you pay him more than the, whatever the $3 million or thereabouts this year. You have to pay him more than that because you're going to have to give him that guaranteed, the signing bonus, but that's just cash. That's not, you spread the cap hit out over 3 years. You add $5 million. They're fine cap wise. Take a little bit of that money now, a little bit of that money later, and $10 million a year, that makes sense. And then that 3rd year is probably fake, but even if it's not, if he plays up to the contract, maybe he gets there and by 2027, the cap has gone up another 600%, and so it doesn't really matter. Also, your window to win is right now. This is interesting, though, because Brian Gutekunst said, we want to get this done. He also said that before we got the reporting on Jaire Alexander. And I wonder if they feel like, hey, look, maybe we just ride this out this year. Ride the lightning. See what you can do. Maybe Jeff Hafley leaves next offseason. That would be a bummer, but it could happen. And you don't want to have money committed to a player that, let's be honest, we just haven't seen play at a high level with any sort of consistency. Jaire Alexander is the opposite. He's been a very consistent player. We just haven't seen him play. But what if the calculation has changed over the last week or so? That would not be surprising. Hey, you go into the draft, you think, hey, we're going to keep Quay Walker, we're going to keep Devontae Wyatt. They pick up the option on Wyatt. But then you come out of the draft and you go, wait, maybe we can fix this. Like suddenly Alexander's willing to come to the table and let's have a discussion about this. Well, maybe we'd rather earmark money for Jaire Alexander than Quay Walker. And hey, maybe what we do is we build those incentives into the 2027 contract as well and do the same thing we just talked about. Hey, let's up the total potential value of that deal. But you got to play. Interesting. I'm just wondering if there is a related piece here, because when the Packers did the Jordan Love deal, it was basically simultaneous and it was almost on deadline. It was like up to the deadline. But we didn't have the like 6 days of the news cycle of, oh, wow, Jordan Love got his option declined. What's going to happen now? No, it was like he got a new deal. That's not where we are right now. They could get a contract done now. It could happen in August. It could happen in September. It's interesting. And it's hard for me to believe the timing is coincidental, that all of a sudden the narrative changes on Jaire Alexander. And now we're going, maybe Quay Walker is not the no doubt future player. And maybe, I find it hard to believe that they looked at their roster and said, actually, we now, because the one true stack linebacker that they brought in, an undrafted free agent, is the reason to say, hey, maybe you don't need to make a long-term commitment to Quay Walker. I find that ridiculous, frankly, especially without ever seeing him be on an NFL field. But I wonder, not about that specifically, but just about if their priorities have changed, if the plans have changed. Again, they could have been working out a contract here. Brian Gutekunst said they wanted to work out a contract here. Wyatt had his option picked up, just like Brian Gutekunst said, but now Quay Walker is not having his option picked up, and we don't have a replacement, at least that you and I know of. The Packers might be working on one, but we don't know anything about it, and we've seen no reporting on it. That's interesting at the very least. And it is something that I think we are going to have to watch. He gets the option declined. Okay, what does that look like in August? What does that look like in September? Are we getting reporting that they're working toward a deal? Or is this just like, hey, let's show us one more time, Quay? Which, by the way, I have no problem with. I am at once, I was probably the last remaining Quay skeptic, or one of them, and it was certainly one of the most ardent Quay Walker skeptics to start his NFL career. But I like to think that I was quick to point out when he was playing well last season, that month in the middle of the season, and then that Eagles game, he played really, really well. Now, is that enough for me to want to give him a long-term deal? No, it isn't. I was trying to create a framework whereby the Packers might want to do that because it seems like they believe in that. But again, if I were Russ Ball, if I were making these calls, if I were being asked to advise Russ Ball, I would say you might want to make him play it out. And then look, if he comes out the first 6 weeks of the season like gangbusters, it's like, hey man, let's do this. Let's get a contract done. And if he says thanks but no thanks, then let somebody else give him $18 million a year. It would not be me. It would not be me. I'll tell you that right now. I just think there's too many opportunities in free agency to find competent linebacker play, and all you really need is competent linebacker play unless you have someone who's a true field tilter, Edgerrin Cooper. It doesn't really matter. And every year you can go out in free agency and find you're not going to get Zach Bond in that he's going to turn into an all-pro, but you can find those guys on the street. They're available. So I would not be in any rush to say, let me pay this guy. I would make him prove it. And then if he does, pay him. Like if he says, okay, this year I'm going to show you I'm an impact player, and he does that, and he looks like a true, like him and Edgerrin Cooper together, it's Willis and Bowman from the 49ers days back in the day. Like, great, pay him. But if that's not what happens, the money was it was always too much. But I'm not like the option that I provided. I don't even feel that strongly about it. Like, yeah, it would make sense, but it wouldn't be a problem if they went another direction. I know if you might find this hard to believe. I don't really have strong takes about it. Like if they paid a reasonable price for Quay Walker on extension, I would go, okay, as I laid out. But if they just let him play the string out, like I feel like that's kind of what I would do too. Because I just, as much as I was heartened by what I saw in the middle of last year, there's a reason I have to add that qualifier because it was just the middle of last year and then he was hurt and he didn't play well to start the season. So what am I supposed to believe? I'd like to see more. Sorry. I'm not sorry. All right, back next week. I mentioned Chancellor Johnson, former Packers reporter, now in Houston, had a great sit down with Matthew Golden. We're going to talk about Matthew Golden next week. And by the time we talk next week, the Packers will be in the building for rookie camps. So we'll hear from Matt LaFleur about them. We'll get a chance to get reports on what's going on in rookie camp. Let's not overreact to rookie camp. Remember, Josh Jones back in the day was a future Hall of Famer in rookie camp. So we'll be reasonable about all of that. Follow me on all the social media platforms that you can possibly find me on. Same with the podcast. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. And of course, over on our YouTube page so you can stay locked on Packers.